Women across the country are going to court in a sweeping demand for increased police emphasis on investigating rape cases, many of which have been backlogged and neglected for years by police departments. Legal journalist Molly Barrows joins us now to break this down. So, Molly, first off, explain to us what this rape kit backlog actually is. What does that mean? What's happening here?
So according to these criminal justice advocacy groups like End the Backlog, which I recently learned was actually founded by Mariska Hargitay, the actress from, SVU, Special Victims Unit on Law and Order. But it's essentially an initiative to bring attention to the fact that you have literally hundreds of thousands of untested rape kits in law enforcement agencies and in labs across the country. And they say it's a two-part problem, that there's no federal law mandating essentially the tracking and testing of these kits. And so they're being gathered in some cases and simply not sent to the lab for testing, or they're being sent to the lab for testing and they're not being prioritized for testing. So the result is the same, and that these test kits are sitting there languishing for, in some cases, years, actually collecting mold, and nothing's been done. So that's the problem in a nutshell of what this backlog is. And then the other issue is that it's the cost. So there's a number of reasons why law enforcement agencies say that these tests aren't being taken care of immediately, and it's that they don't have the resources or the personnel. But these women that are being victimized essentially by not having their rape kits tested aren't buying it. And so you're seeing a wave of lawsuits across the country.
So what are these survivors? What are they alleging against the police departments in court?
It's a number of issues. Most of these cases are actually being filed in federal court, and what they're looking towards is the Equal Protection Clause, basically saying that they're not being treated fairly. They're being unfairly discriminated against because of being a woman. Again, going back to police aren't prioritizing these for whatever reason. If they're blaming it on resources, they don't want to pay $1,000 to $1,500 per test to get it tested, or maybe they don't have the proper personnel trained. So that's what some of these lawsuits are saying, that they're basically neglecting to process these kits. They're not setting aside the resources. They're not properly training personnel. And essentially a wide group of people, victims, women primarily, are being discriminated against. So that's where the Equal Protection Clause comes in. They're essentially saying that by failing to test the kit, it's deliberate indifference.
Yeah. So what obstacles have we seen between, the delay in this, the statute of limitations, which is a huge issue we see in any kind of sexual assault case.
Right.
But it seems like delaying these or not prioritizing them, letting them languish and get moldy, as you pointed out, doesn't that kind of interfere with the statute of limitations a bit?
It is. And I think part of what you're seeing is because this is they're breaking new ground for pursuing these cases. And so in some regards, courts are having to take a fresh look at the Equal Protection Clause, and if this is what a victim is in fact suing under, they're saying, well, you don't meet the criteria because of statute of limitations, or you don't meet the criteria because who are you comparing your group to? If you as women were discriminated against, that's part of the problem. There was one woman, a victim in San Francisco, who sued the San Francisco Police Department. She said she was raped after going to an outdoor city concert in 2010. She kept asking for 2 years, where's the results of my rape kit? It's a humiliating process, Farron. These women have to go to a doctor or a hospital, basically get swabs. You've already been through this traumatic experience, and then to go through this, and then you're waiting for the results because you want to file charges or you want to find out who your attacker was. In some cases, they don't even know. And on a tangent, by the way, going off on a tangent, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office got some money to help jurisdictions across the country to test some of these untested kits. And when they started doing that, they are clearing some of these cases in big ways. Like they cleared some 64 cases, including a case out in Arizona, which was the basis of another lawsuit. But going back to the San Francisco victim, she basically said, hey, why hasn't my rape kit been tested yet? And this was 2 years afterwards. Then 2 years after that, in 2014, she discovered there were hundreds of backlog cases, untested kits. And so that's when she filed this lawsuit saying, hey, this is discriminatory. You're not doing what you said you should do, and I'm being unfairly persecuted, and so are these other victims. And the district court said, well, your statute of limitations actually started when your rape kit was tested in 2012. It didn't start when you learned about the backlog in 2014. So going back to your point, what other avenues do they have? It's almost new ground. They're trying to figure out how to apply this law, and if it does apply. And I think it's just a matter of the right case getting before the right judge and the right circumstances in order to make some headway. Because I think you saw with domestic violence victims back in the 70s and 80s, too.
Well, And so in addition to going after the police departments here, is there any other groups that these survivors are going after?
The labs and their processes and how they determine and prioritize how cases should be tested. But for the most part, it's basically just all part of the criminal justice system in general. And so they're starting with these police departments because they're in these advocacy groups' minds, I should say, as well as the victims, they're looking at it like, hey, you have hundreds and thousands of cases. Potentially, they can't really tell because, again, there's no mandatory reporting, but there's hundreds of thousands of cases backlogged across the country, and they're essentially saying, hey, if you're not gonna do something about it, then let me go to somebody else and have them do it, so we can find out who did this and perhaps take a perpetrator off the street. They really don't have a lot of other options except to hope that other law enforcement will come in, like maybe a county district attorney's office or the Justice Department, for example. There was a raid back in 2007, apparently in a Chicago community, where the Department of Justice went in and found evidence that there were, into police, prosecutors, and public university officials in Missoula, Montana. And they found evidence that all three were violating the Equal Protection Clause by failing to respond to these sexual assault cases. And they signed legal agreements to change their practice. But since Trump has taken office, the Department of Justice has not been holding these law enforcement agencies accountable like they had before. So if there's no watchdog, these police are basically left to their own devices. And again, going back to victims saying, we go and file complaints and we get these direct responses from law enforcement. One woman, the San Francisco victim, was saying that they told her she was menstruating and that she shouldn't have been out partying with the city. Otherwise, that might not have happened to her. And it's unbelievable that you hear these things. But this is the kind of situation that these victims are coming across, the type of interactions that they're having in some cases with law enforcement. And then the tangible result is these hundreds of untested kits. They're saying that's evidence enough that they're being discriminated against and nobody really cares.
Well, and, I am the last person to ever be in favor of kind of privatizing something. But when you think about the fact that now we've got all these DNA companies out there. You swab your cheek, you send it in.
23andMe,
right.
You want to get in on the rape kit testing business?
And in just a couple weeks, they send you back this thing, your entire family tree from your DNA. They have the resources in the private industry to do this. And it seems like this could be a decent opportunity, although that is also fraught with lots of legal questions too. But the technology is out there with these companies. And if we could, as a government, as a state government, federal government, whatever it is, find a good partner in this that's, one, not going to overcharge us on this, but two, also not sell this data to anyone else, which that in of itself is a problem.
You're so right.
We have these groups out there that are capable of doing this. They have the technology, and it seems almost stubborn that they will not help in these particular cases. These are serious issues. These are rapes.
Absolutely.
And we need to solve them, and they could be helping with this, and yet they want money.
Yeah, and if it's going to cost $1,000 to $1,500, then why can't you privatize it and basically have accredited agencies that go through whatever law enforcement standards are required in order to be able to be testify in court that your results are legal and that they've gone through a certain process, because I think that's part of it. They need to have these accredited labs that are going to hold up in court with whatever their results are. But, you're absolutely right. It's interesting. I think these women don't have a lot of options, but we do have the technology to find out what the answers are. And as proven in that Manhattan DA's case, when he started putting money into these cases, they found serial rapists. I mean, that's what they found. And in some cases, for instance, the San Francisco case, again, when she did get her results back, it was a hit to someone that they didn't know. But in other cases, they're getting hits to where, oh my goodness, we're seeing a pattern here. This person victimized any number of women in a certain city or in a certain community, or they committed a different crime, and now we've connected them. Just like they did with, I can't remember the serial killer, but out in California, when they basically used these DNA companies and found a relative based on DNA found on a victim of one of his crimes, and they went through that avenue. So if they can spend that kind of time and resources to find a serial killer on DNA, then it does lend credence to their complaint that, hey, you simply don't care. You're simply not prioritizing. And how do you prove that in court? So they're going at it with this Equal Protection Clause, but the courts are saying, you're not quite there yet. We're either going to put a wrench in the works by saying, what group are you comparing yourself to? How have you been harmed? How are you being treated any differently? What do you do as a woman who's not had their rape kit tested? Do you compare yourself to a man who's a victim of domestic violence as how police treated him? Where's the comparable group?
Right. And that's going to be something that's difficult. But I think
it's
they've got a very
doable.
solid case here. So, Molly Barrows, thank you very much for telling us
Thanks,
the story.
Farron.
Every year, 1 million hernia surgeries are performed in the United States. Unfortunately, some mesh implants that are used in these surgeries have caused complications, including infection and organ damage that led to surgeries to correct those problems. If this has happened to you, learn more about the hernia mesh lawsuit by going online to hernia.law or call us for a free consultation about your legal rights.